Ellis from Iowa State is our marketing analyst this week. The Sterling Beef Profit Tracker revealed another rough go for the week ending November 17th, with feedlots showing a negative margin over $93 a head and packers with a loss of more than $83 per head. We talked with Shane Thursday morning and asked what ISU's profitability model showed for beef producers going forward.
Well, they're actually improving. I don't know if we could have come off of a harder bottom than what we were a couple months ago, but we're going to slowly see that profitability seep back into the finishing side of things for our producers. From now, probably even some potential profitability as early as January or February, but more than likely March, April, and May are shaping up to be fairly profitable months for our producers. We would hope so. That's usually the best time to be selling cattle, and it's looking like we might have a little bit of reprieve, like I say, from the red ink.
What's helping there? Is it lower corn prices? Is it just that tight supply finally coming through? Which is it? Or one of those two, or none of the above?
I think it's definitely a combination of those two. Of course, we're not looking at quite $8 corn, but that corn price is still pretty steep. Luckily, overall demand has driven down that price of corn, and that is helping. Here in Iowa, we're seeing a lot of producers using silage, of course the co-products.
Right.
So wherever there's alternative feeds available, that's also going to help the bottom line. On the demand side, yes, we're going to be looking at tighter supplies of beef going out into particularly next year's grilling season. If we're looking at the cattle on feed right now, we're down about 5%. That's definitely an indication of the decline in the number of animals that'll be harvested next year. And that's coming into play a little bit there, where we're seeing those prices move upwards. We were a bit of a doldrums for the last month, not really wondering how demand was going to respond to higher prices coming into the next year. But we've seen that loosened up here in the last week or so, and the outlook is improving right now.
We learned last week that the EPA would not be waiving the renewable fuel standard in the regards to ethanol. Does that surprise you, and do you think it makes a difference here as we look towards maybe next year as well?
I don't think it was too much of a surprise. I think a lot of people were hoping that it would be a bit of an opportunity where that could be pushed to the side. But the EPA kind of did their own analysis, and they determined it would only lower corn prices, maybe a penny per bushel. Without getting into their analysis side of that, I don't think too many people were surprised that the EPA was dragging their feet. Right now, the amount of ethanol that's being produced is being dictated by the markets. If it's not profitable to produce it, then we're going to see that industry start to pull back a little bit. So far, we haven't pushed things back enough on our production to call into order, why aren't we up to that standard right now? But in a few years, we actually see that standard increasing and exceeding our current capacity for production. I think that's when people are really going to start to question. I think that's a problem that a lot of folks were hoping to avoid going out there in the future by seeing those renewable fuel standard relaxed a little bit. We're going to have to see how it kind of plays out. There's a lot of factors coming into the play right now as to whether or not that standard can still be met. I don't know. It's a capacity issue. Yeah, we can build additional plants, but where are we going to see that ethanol used, and is it still viable for a lot of these ethanol plants to produce at their same levels?
We talked with you last February in West Point. We talked about turning the ship to try to increase cattle inventory. We were coming off of a drought in Texas. Now we're going to have back-to-back droughts with Texas and now the Midwest. There's also a battle for acres, as you mentioned then, between corn, soybeans, wheat, and then trying to turn that land into something for livestock. How far are we from average or returning to average?
An average as far as our cattle inventory, or as far as our weather? We got a lot of ground to recover.
Weather-wise, right?
In the Midwest, a little bit on the climate side. We're very dry. We've seen a lot of our submoisture used up this year. What was there in some of our crops here and in Nebraska. What do we do if we don't get moisture to replenish that? Next year's crop could be even tighter.
What about inventory, though?
On the cattle inventory, we are expecting kind of a leveling off as far as the decline that we've seen the last couple of years. We were hoping that we would see things level off in 2012, but of course the drought kind of pushed that back a little bit further. We saw a lot of liquidation of cows. Yeah, some in the Midwest, but particularly more the western states, Colorado, western Kansas, western Nebraska, Wyoming. We will see in the coming years those inventories coming back into those areas and Texas as we see the climate improve. But where we're sitting right now, I don't anticipate additional cows calving until 2015. So that will be the year that we'll start to see the beef calf crop start to increase. Looking at total cattle inventories, we're still bleeding cattle off of the dairy side because profitability is very it's just non-existent in the dairy industry right now. It's not just elusive, and so they are pulling back on dairy numbers there also. I think that as we're looking at the total impacts, as we see the weather improve and drought conditions moderate for the southern plains states and the western states, that is where we'll see that inventory increase once again, but it will take a few more years before we'll actually see that happen. Anticipating heifer retention being fairly steady at the beginning of this year, maybe up even 1% from last year. But that drought did have an impact. A lot of these guys that maybe were wanting to hold heifers or did hold heifers, they still ended up having to cull pretty heavily just because of the dry conditions.